The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secret.
Debbie Kiederer, welcome to Founder Secrets.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm also very excited. Debbie and I have known each other for a long time. Flavio and I have worked together on the board of EO New York, and just I see you as someone with a lot of wisdom and a lot of great experience that I'm sure we'll share today. But before we jump into that, we're gonna start with an icebreaker. This should be a fun one. What's the earliest programming language that you touched? And if today you had to give some advice to a 13-year-old, what's the programming language that you'd teach or ask a 13-year-old to learn today? Debbie, do you want to start?
I'm not going to say the very earliest, but I'm going to say what I took Fortran and Cobalt when I was in college. And I did those for like 2 years. And it's when I decided I was not going to be a computer scientist and not going to be a programmer. But actually in my career, I've actually overseen a lot of the engineering and programming. So it actually worked really well in the sense that I took that. So, and a 13-year-old, I really thought about this, and I don't know if I would tell them to go into development or programming. I don't know. I feel like we're so unsure of the future and what it's going to hold. And I can say that when I graduated college, what I became in my business didn't exist when I graduated college. And so I don't want to say a 13-year-old should do specifically something, because I don't know what that is. I always say this, and Taylor, you know this, that you should do what you love. Study what you love, because that can translate almost anywhere. And down the road, if you need to take classes in programming, you can. But I feel like if you love to do programming, great. But to a 13-year-old, I would say really find a passion that you love and do that.
I'll go here. So the earliest programming was, I guess, depending on how you define programming, I taught myself HTML when I was 13. And so that I would really not consider programming, but Visual Basic was my first language. By the way, Fortran and these other, like, they're still in use. COBOL, still in use today, right? Especially in the financial sector.
Yeah, exactly. They have their place, but it's like most people would not, like Java would be, you would know the ones everyone knows, but I feel like those two were hard. Like they were just not, they were programming that was like deep, like there was just a core to them that anyway, I enjoyed them, did not want to study them anymore.
Probably more people are working on language Fortran than Visual Basic, VB6 that I was kind of working on. And what I'd teach a 13-year-old, or what I'd recommend a 13-year-old, I've been following Flavio's advice, been going to some conferences. I went to a robotics conference last week. It was an industrial robotics conference, very eye-opening. These are very expensive robots. And that's what I would push a 13-year-old. I think that I'd say learn, Arduinos just got bought, a week ago, rumored to get bought by Qualcomm. But go learn some things about robotics, like hacking together, Arduinos or these other kind of hobbyist things. And that, I think that's what I'd push, like learn some of that language, learn some of the physics behind it. Because I think it'll explode. It is already exploding. Flavio, what about you?
Telling a 13-year-old to go to conferences? Like,
Not yet.
get out there.
Not yet.
So for me, there's this language called Tickle, or TCL. It's actually, it's part of IRC, which is chat, like Slack for old people like me back in the day. And so I built a trivia bot that would ask you trivia questions. I think, and actually now looking back, it's similar to Python. I think that's still what 13-year-olds should learn, because it's the easiest, the most close to English. But really, more importantly, I think they should learn to use a tool like any of the AI assistants to help them code and kind of have that ability to create with the help of an assistant. I feel like that's a good way. When I taught computer science, it was always like a long ramp up to get to somewhere where somebody's like, oh wow, I built this. It'd be like, 10 hours of investment into boring stuff before you're like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Whereas now it's like 10 seconds before they can do something cool. And so they should do that and build on top of it.
So Debbie, you came from the corporate side, luxury kind of beauty, and then launched launched Chalk Dust, launched a consulting firm, but 3 weeks before 9/11. Kind of rough timing. But something you say is that Chalk Dust makes sure that an e-commerce website is so good that someone has to buy. It's just a seamless transaction. But a lot of your work is kind of outside the U.S., right? So it's U.S. companies that want to expand. Can you just talk through like what does Chalk Dust do today? What was kind of your niche early on to figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I feel like, I launched my company in, yeah, 3 weeks before 9/11 in 2001. And but I started like overseeing the build of enterprise websites in like 1996, which was super early, right, for enterprise. Like it was just, and there were only like three companies we could work with in California. And so, I mean, California and Boston, but really California. And so when I think about like the build of though, it's like AI, like we didn't know what was happening. Everybody was like, what is going on? There were certain companies that could do it. And I feel like what we did, and I was still corporate then. And so I helped to build the first Clinique website. And then e-commerce was 1998, which was really early for e-commerce for that large of a site, right? And so I feel like I was very much in the bubble of e-com, but in a stable bubble versus the bubble of everybody that was like, valued in 100,000 times more than they were, like I wasn't in that bubble. I was in the build of like these very secure kind of companies. And I think for me, what I was able to do is, work in North America, and then we took them and we localized those sites into countries around the world. And I was very lucky in Clinique because I worked internationally for a long time before I left there. And I feel like that really gave me the experience to be able to kind of take when you build a website in a language and then you have to build it in other languages, you really have to think about like how that's going to work. And when I say localize, it means that we're going to take that and we're going to say, okay, if we build this in France, it's not going to be the same as US. What does the French, consumer need versus what the US consumer needs? They're different. And so I think we really became, and that's when I started my business. I was like, we're going to really do that. And actually, the first site I ever launched was Cadillac, which was a US based, but it was very much a robust site. That was my first client. And it actually was through an agency. And then I started working with Estee Lauder again after that. So I feel like what we do at Chalk Dust is really help to understand the global sense of how to sell to consumers in the way that you're positioning your sites. And now it's everything sites, not just a website, but everything else too.
You launched the first website of Clinique, is that right? That's incredible. So you were there when it got started?
I was there when I was like, oh my gosh, we have to find a new photographer because we can't use the photographers that we have now because they're way too expensive. So I literally had to we didn't know what we were doing. Like Akamai had just started and we're like, do you want to meet us? Because we don't know what you do, but you probably could help us with your CDNs. Right. Like these were people I worked with Kodak and had then come down and talk about calibrating machines because we were doing shades and we're like, how do we work off a Mac or for a PC? Because one's more amber, one's more blue. Like just the things we had to think about then that you don't do now, but everybody was just figuring it out, just like AI.
So did you get any stock in Clinique?
I did. I was part of the company for a long time. No, and so I mean, I worked for Clinique for 13 years, right?
Wait, they didn't give you stock?
I did, yeah.
Oh, you did. Oh, great. Because then eventually sold for hundreds of millions.
I think with the stock you get when you're in those companies, like, yes, I actually was part of their IPO and then I was part of yeah, so I was there a long time ago. And so I feel like, for me, it was one of the smartest, greatest companies that I could work for. And I can say that to this day that I've worked with many, many companies, and I would still always go back to say that when I worked with the Estee Lauder companies, there was a sharpness to them that other companies didn't necessarily have.
And you were there at the IPO,
I was.
like ringing the bell. stuff?
I was not there, but I was there when the company went IPO, and it was a very different time. It was a very family run business. It was when it went IPO, it changed a bit, but I was there when there were only 4 companies at Estee, and I don't know how many they have today, but many, many more than 4.
Do you see any parallels between what you were just explaining with like the early web 98? Does it feel similar today with AI, or does it feel just completely different?
No, completely the same. I
The
have to
same. Yeah.
say. I remember watching the Super Bowl the year that all of those commercials were all about the web, all about websites, and everybody's like, "What is this? Like, what's happening?" Right? Like, what is happening here? And the dot-com bubble was the dot-com bubble, but there was this moment which I feel like we're in today. This I feel like is a repeat. Just like history repeats itself, right? I feel like we're just in another technology bubble and the bubble will, whether it bursts or not, it's not that's the point. It's going to find its way. And I don't have a lot of fear around any of this. I think because I was part of that other bubble, and it was like everybody thought there would be no more retail stores. It was all going to go away. And that is so not what happened, right? What happened is in the doors, like, your website became your biggest door, the most best performing door, but it didn't replace retail, right? Maybe for some it eventually did, but at the time it was not like that. And I feel like AI is the same. It's going to take over some things right now, but then it's going to find its way. And I truly believe it's a tool that is going to help us all just be better at what we do.
I'm with you. Well, some days I'm with you. Some days it scares me. But uh, you, do you think that there are corporate habits? Because some people come on here that they say, and you hear it a lot too. They say, "Oh, I could never work in corporate America," or I was born to be an entrepreneur. I can't. You can't be a boss of me." But I know you've said in some interviews that you were and would be a great corporate executive, and you were and would be a great entrepreneur. Do you see them as similar skills, or do you just have two kind of distinct personalities and you could turn on the corporate, hey, look, I'm really good over here, and I'm going to turn on this other skill set to be a good entrepreneur?
I think it's so funny. I'm working with somebody now who has a similar background to me, who was corporate and then went entrepreneurial, and we're both like, it's the positive side of being corporate is you really learn how to communicate in a way that helps you win over people. Because in corporate, you really have to share, like, this is what I want to do. And a whole bunch of people have to say, yes, we want to do this, right? So as you climb the corporate ladder and you get more influential in what you're doing, the corporate, I mean, I understand from a positioning of a boss, right? But our clients are our bosses. I don't know any entrepreneur that doesn't have, like, at some point you always have somebody you're kind of talking to, and even if you have a product, your consumer is kind of your boss, right? Like, it's like, okay, you have to buy it. So somehow in all that we do, there is kind of, we're autonomous to a point, right? And so I think when I look at my ability to be corporate, it was that I was very comfortable in talking to people about what I wanted to do and selling through the things that I thought we should do. And that really taught me how to be a great entrepreneur. And I think the thing, because I think, Taylor, and I've had 5 businesses, right? So it's like I've been in this space of like building and learning and doing all these other things. And I think part of that is just understanding how to communicate. And so in corporate, you communicate differently than you do as an entrepreneur, but not really. And so I think one of my successes has been when I built Chalk Dust, I really was a client partner because I understood what it was like. I know how to actually get a capital budget. Like, I know how to do things in corporate. I know how to, like, go around procurement, like, don't do this. I know how much usually you can have somebody spend, like they can write the check versus getting a whole bunch of other things. So, like I always said this, I always go into corporations. I used to at least under $25,000. I didn't have to worry about anything, but ultimately I would get to 6-7 figures but I never had to then work. So I knew the ways around things, which allowed me to actually be more successful in building my business.
Sounds like you can go from corporate to entrepreneurship. Some of those skills translate. I wonder if like that's reversible. Like, are you able to go? Do you ever go back from entrepreneur?
So can I share a story about that? So I ended up having an interview. I'm not going to say the company. I had to sign an NDA just even to go to the interview. And they asked me to be the president of a new division that they were opening. And I had 6 interviews in one day, right? So, because that's what you do when you have that, right? So I go to this corporate office and I sit down with the managing partner and I say to him, this is the space we were going to go into. And I said, here's where we are. So if we want to enter this space, I would like to bring together a number of thought leaders so that we could figure out, since we're entering the space late, how we would put this together. So, like, here's my thinking. And he looked at me and he said, we don't do that. That's not what we do.
Thinking? We don't do thinking?
We don't do that. He's like, we just need you to tell us who your CFO is, your CMO, where's your org chart? I said, I don't want an org chart until I understand what we're doing in the business. Like, the business needs to be looked at because we're like 5 years late into this. And I understand you're bringing, they were bringing a partner from Europe in. And I was like, okay, so this is what I'm thinking. And I remember thinking 15 minutes into the interview, I'm never getting this job because this is not, he doesn't even understand the way I think. Like, this doesn't make sense, right? And so I went to the rest of the interviews and I interviewed them. I was like, well, I'm not going to get the job, so I might as well interview them. So every person I went to, I said, how are you going to do this? And what are you going to do here? And how are you going to do this? And they were working with France. And I was like, have you worked with France before? Like, do you know how? And they were like, no, no, no. And midway through, they said, would you be a consultant for us if you don't get this job? And I was like, time out. But at the end, this is the best part about this. At the end, my recruiter called me as soon as I got in the car, and I was like, sorry, that was just, he goes, oh no, you have no idea. He's like, about 3 hours into your interviews, they called us up and they want to change the entire job description. So when you're an entrepreneur going in, your really thinking is so different because you're constantly pivoting in the work that we do, right? We're always like, how are we going to make this work? How is this going to be better? And you don't get into the mindset of like, I have a job, because you don't really have a job, right? You're always creating something else. And so I left there thinking, oh, this was just terrible. And the recruiter was like, yeah, you don't have the job, but we've now redone the whole thing. And I think I was kind of put in there as a little bit of a disruptor anyway. So, Flavio, that's the answer. Like, I'm not sure we can get it, but yeah.
Did you get the consulting contract out of it though?
No, I realized that that was not a company that they did reach back out to me, but I realized that I couldn't really be there. Like, as an entrepreneur where you can, the nice part about being an entrepreneur is you can make that choice, right? Like, we're not going to work there. So,
We were talking a little bit before the show, and luxury beauty brands are kind of struggling right now. Can you speak to that? Like, what do you think is going on? Is there something strange going on in the economy, or what do you think's going on?
I mean, I think the economy is a big part of it. I think right now, I think there's a quiet recession we're all in that nobody wants to talk about. Like, it's really about, and it's been going on for a couple of years. And I think when we had, the 2008 economy thing, a lot of us in the services business didn't feel it exactly in 2008. We felt it a couple of years later, right? It was kind of coming through. It wasn't so certain industries got hit. I think luxury in general is just going through like kind of a transformation. They have to figure out where they want to be and who they're talking to. And I think from when you're a big organization, no matter what you're in, like fashion, beauty, anything, you really have to start looking at, what does the consumer want now? Like, where are we and how are we communicating with them, right? And I think larger organizations, social, and the way we actually communicate socially is harder, right? There's more governance, there's more compliance, there's more things you can't do, where indie brands are like, I can say whatever I want because what's going to really happen, right? So I think when you're in a larger corporation, there's so much more you have to contend with versus not. And I think the indie brands really are those that have a voice that they can do and say mostly anything because they're not tied to so much that goes on within the corporation. So I can't really speak to luxury in general, but what I can speak to is in these economies, the bigger corporations do tend to have to figure out things a little bit differently because they do have, like, what we would call red tape. Like, this is just harder to move the needle.
So you're saying indie brands have taken market share in large part because their messaging can be more effective and adapts quicker. I'm wondering though, because I also come across a lot of indie brands that are struggling. Do you think it's just too crowded of a market on the indie side as well?
So I'm going to say something here. Like, most people that build an indie brand, at least the ones that I've actually talked to or worked with, their goal is to sell to a large corporate. Like, that's the goal, right? You really want to do that. And some of them don't, but a lot of them do. And I think I think everyone, I do think there's a struggle right now nobody wants to talk about. Like, it's hard out there right now. And as an entrepreneur, we feel it because, we're trying to stay within what we know, but yet, it's just difficult. So I think, Flavio, everybody is kind of struggling in their own way. And there may be some that are outliers that are doing really fabulously well. But even when you look at those that are fabulous, if it's in the AI space, the bubble thing is like, okay, what does that really mean? Like, are we all going to come back out again in 2 years and be like, okay, what happened? So my feeling is there's a quiet recession and it's been going on for a long time. And I think for those of us that are smaller, agile companies, we're trying to navigate that as best we can. Would you agree?
I agree. So I think there are some parts. It's so hard to tell because I feel like at these different conferences you can feel it in some of the rooms, and then some of the rooms it feels like you're in, a boom town. It feels like that nobody wants to close their eyes. They don't want the music to stop. Uh, so that's part of the reason we're asking these questions. I mean, you have a lot of exposure to these powerful companies. Um, uh, you were very early to the remote work kind of angle, right? I think you were remote from the beginning. So way before it was cool. And can you just speak to how did you do that? You went against the grain. Like that was very much against the grain. Now it's cool and sexy and all that. But how did you convince people to do it? And then how did you build a culture? Because I know people who are really struggling with building a remote culture. They were very focused on in person. COVID changed it. They're like, oh, I could just do work in my pajamas. And now I think few years later, they're looking at it saying, I think we lost some things, right? I think we lost some of the culture or some of the identity of the business, or my employees aren't as sticky, or they don't feel as engaged. So can you just speak to like what you've learned and how you've been able to build a real culture around remote work?
Yeah, so I can speak to this from two things, right? So one, I built remote work for myself. Like, I worked in corporate, right? I went to a job every day. I was like kind of in that space, and I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. And part of my goal was that I had two young children and a third on the way, and I was like, I'm not going to the office anymore because this is crazy. I remember my late husband and I would be like, okay, I'm going to work till 10 o'clock tonight. You work till 10 o'clock tomorrow night. We'll all be home at 6 o'clock the other nights. But it was like managing this time frame. And I was like, I don't want to do that again. So when I started my business, I had a home office. And when I started hiring, the first person I hired was in Boston. And I was like, do you think you can work from home? And she was like, sure. And she was fabulous. And she actually just started her own business now, like within the last year. And so I was like, I can do this. I can figure it out. And I think part of the reason I could do it is when I was at Clinique and I was actually running their operations for their creative department, I worked with a lot of vendors that were remote, but I needed to work with them as if they were in my studio. And so I was used to saying, like, can you bring this? How are we going to do this? And we didn't have all the tools we have today. So I was very comfortable saying, oh, I'm going to work with this studio and that studio and do this. And so when I started my business, I'm like, I'm just going to do the same thing. And the only way you could actually communicate was Yahoo Chat. Like, that was the only one that you could do anything with. So that's how we actually communicated, was through Yahoo Chat. And everything was on the phone. We didn't have any of that. But the culture I built was about hiring people that wanted the same thing. Hiring people that wanted to work from home, hiring people that wanted to have a life outside of just working. I called it life work integration. It was never life work balance. It was integration. Your work. So I had some people wake up at 5 a.m. and they work, and I never dictated any hours, right? And I only hired small businesses, people that had one or two people working in the business. And I really worked with them on the way they wanted to work. I was like, as long as you deliver, I don't care when you work. I just need you to do what you need to do. And if you want to work from 5 to 7 or 5 to 9, get your kids on the bus, go back, whatever. I had artists, I had musicians, I had so many people that had other passions, and that needed to be part of their life. And then my productivity, remember when COVID came out, it was like, oh my God, people have so much time left, right? They would say to me when I went to work, they'd be like, I work so much more for you because I can do so much more in the time, because they're focused, and then they can go play or do what they need to do without feeling guilty. So the culture I built was about you, the person, and how do we work together so that you can produce and then be who you need to be. And there was so much gratitude in that. So I think we've talked about, I mean, in 2017 I had 43 consultants working with me, and I think at that point it was very much about everybody finding their way. And we were working like in Asia, so our time zones were like, we work in lots of places, but one of our main clients was in Asia. But people were up at 5 a.m. to take meetings, and people were going to bed at 2 a.m. And it was like, but then they had the day, the rest of the day. And so it was more about, the culture was about you, the person. And every retreat I did was self-development. I brought somebody in to help them be better people, and then the company's just better because they're better people. So it was really all about them. And I remember talking to people about, well, how do you know you're paying them if they're not working all the time? And I was like, I know the people that pad their hours. I can go to them and say what's happening. I said, but I also know the people that are, if as long as they produce what we need to produce, I don't really care. What I care about is that we are a company that is producing for our clients, and that's most important. And when you give people that opportunity to be a whole person, it just changes the way they work.
So you said you built 5 companies. What are the five real quick?
So I had Chalk Dust has been so I had Minica Studios, which was just me. That was my sole entrepreneurship. Chalk Dust started in 2001. I had a company called Beauty Pearls for Chemo Girls. It's the book I co-authored, which is a book that my co-author is a cancer survivor, and because I was in the beauty industry, it's a journalist approach to going having working with chemotherapy and just understanding basically how to like survive through that process. And it was based on the drugs that you were taking at the time and like how to manage that. And then I had a company called Mobile Fields for like a year or two. And that was like when text messaging first came out, and we were like, it was like a whole thing around texting. And then I had a Vanishing Hanger, which is my tech platform, which is really about, and Vanishing Hanger is in a very interesting place right now. I'm always a little too early when I build some things, and that was too early. But it really is about merchandising and having a closet on your website. And it was very complicated, probably too complicated, but it's still around today. And, I'll see what I'm going to do with that now. And does that 4? Did I miss one? I think that's 5.
No, that's five, maybe even six. That's so Chalk Dust sounds like it's been sort of through it all since 2001 to today.
Yeah, that's been my foundational piece. It's 20, it'll be 25 years old next year.
Wow. And that one helps e-commerce website.
Chalk Dust is really about helping you. I think it's a company that allows. It's so funny. I just had my team recently do an elevator pitch. I'm like, all of you have to do an elevator pitch on what Chalk Dust is. Yeah, and what we do, and I was so impressed. I was like, wow, that sounds great. But what I would say is, we are great client partners. We actually help you with your digital presence and understand what you're trying to do, and really create. We really are your partners in building the business you want to build, rebuild, pivot, and we can come in and really kind of build. And it's less about websites now, and it's more about your digital presence, like what and how do you want to do that. And I think we have a partner, an AI partner, that we can work with to kind of help us do kind of frameworks around what you need to do. But I would say, we're in a pivot as well, though. We're trying to figure out, based on where AI is at the moment, just where we fit into the ecosystem too. So, we're looking at different industries now to see if we can help them, because the businesses we did, they're all good now, right? Like they have employees to do what we did. But there are still industries out there that haven't really kind of embarked on this journey, and we're looking at those at the moment.
You and everyone else trying to figure that out.
It's hard, right? Yeah, it's a thing.
I want to switch gears because you were president of EO New York, which, for those who don't know, it's an entrepreneurs group, and everyone in it. There are some staff, but everyone in it is basically a volunteer. They're volunteering their time, and they're an entrepreneur. So they're not getting paid, and they are, used to running their own show. So everyone in it are people like the three of us. And I've seen a lot of presidents, and they're all great in their own ways. But you had a kind of leadership style that I thought everyone really loved, and also you got things done. So to be specific, you were able to get this EO house, this basically a clubhouse, which is still in New York. And the first, I think it was the first one in the world for an EO chapter. People have been talking about it for as long as I've been in EO, over 10 years. People have been talking about it, but it never got done. And during your time, you were able to get it done. And so my question is, how do you lead people who are used to being leaders themselves, right? Like everyone in it used to running their own shots and nobody questions me. But you just do this fantastic job of getting people to align to a vision. And so can you just speak to how you've been able to do that? These people don't work for you, right? Like they work for themselves. So can you just speak to that?
Yeah, I was very thoughtful about who I wanted on my board. So we have a board of people, and there were three visions that I had from my presidency. First of all, New York used to be a chapter that everybody kind of looked up to, and then it kind of got into this weird place, I think, of just like, who are we? I think we were redefining ourselves. And I was president coming out of COVID, but in and out of COVID, right? So the vision I had, there were three, right? One was the DEI initiatives, one was Impact, which was B Corps, and the other one was EO House, right? So those were the three things I really wanted to work on, and I brought people in to help me to do that. And EO House was just built with 4 people that were part of our core team. But what I did was, it was COVID. We could get COVID rent for commercial spaces. And I was like, if we're going to do AO House, we're going to do it right now, because in New York, it is probably one of the hardest cities to open any kind of like clubhouse. I think there were other EO houses, but the concept we did was a clubhouse, which is very different than a shared space, right? Like where you come in and all the businesses work together. And I think the concept around EO House had always been like a shared space of everybody working together. And mine, because I had a virtual company for so long, I was like, no, we need a clubhouse. Like we need a place where people can come work, but also come hang out, kind of be like so more of a like a Noya house, which is a little bit of what I looked at. And I didn't want a Soho house. I didn't want something that was like, so I really did look at a lot of it. When I pitched to on our summit though, because this is what is the testimony to this, is every single board member did a minimum of $2,500 towards the house. In EO House, in EO, nobody needs to give any money when you're actually on the board. Like in not-for-profits, Flavio, we talked about this before. A lot of times you're asked to like really step up and like, provide, but we don't really do that. It's your time. But I was like, if we're going to do this, I'm going to I put a significant amount of money into the EO House. And I said, here's my pledge. What do you do? And basically the way I sold it was, this is how we build community. This is how we're all going to be together. This is going to be a concept that allows us to do more. And being in one of the most international cities in the world, we will get a lot of visitors. So when I pitched the concept around, this is what we wanted to do. And we took a vote. It was it was a secret vote, right? And honestly, at the end, the summit facilitator said it was unanimous. Everybody agreed to do it. So it was really stepping out on a lane. So just to be clear, like we raised almost $100,000 from the board. And then we took from our reserves over $150,000 and built out the space. It was a raw space. And today we are generating revenue from it. And we do almost 90% of our events there. All our trainings are done there. And it's also rentable to EO New York members as well as EO members in general. And then we also can rent to outside. So it's a 4,000 square foot space. We have a full website that shares everything and anything about EO House that you need to know. And we do have a how we built it so people can do it. But I think, Taylor, what you asked me is like, it's really, that's that corporate side. It's like convincing a lot of people. It doesn't matter whether they work for you or not, because in corporate, you're not only managing the people that work for you, you're managing your peers, that if you want to do something, you have to convince them that they are also want to do it. And so I feel like that is where my experience comes in. And I think it's about how you present the concept. And I will say, like, we're in year 5 and it's really been very successful. And we now still have people donating. We had a lot of people doing kind. Anyone hearing this, come visit us. But I think it's about what the value is you're going to get from it in the end.
So you're saying the revenue the EO House brings outweighs the cost? Like it's it's sustaining itself.
So basically it's part of our dues. Like basically we can cover it through the dues, but then we also have additional revenue that actually either can build capital or do whatever. And the goal is, and honestly, I have a deck. Last year we did it. I think we saved over $100,000 or $200,000 by not renting space. Like to have a happy hour in New York right now, it's $4,000 for 30 people. Like what? Our happy hours are $500. Like it totally works, right? So that's the difference. Is it allows us to really provide this opportunity of being in a space of we just we get to do a lot more things than we could ever do if we didn't have it. Now I go there and I'm like, oh my God, like it's like a thriving thing. And when I first was there, I was like, I hope this really works.
It's a very special place. So I think the last question is kind of the way that we started. We're asking what advice you'd have for the 13-year-old kind of programming language. But I think some people are worried right now. Maybe they're they're worried about the economy, or they're worried about, oh my goodness, is AI going to just destroy everything or take my job? Or um, but you're a very optimistic person, and maybe your answer to this question will not be optimistic. But I'm curious how, with some of the things that you've been through and your perspective, how do you stay positive? To be clear, I'm very positive in all this, but how do you stay positive on what's next, and kind of staying ahead of the curve and not being worried about things like AI? What advice would you have to someone around that to keep them positive?
I mean, I think you have to be smart about what you're looking at, right? Like if I were a copywriter now, I'd be a little concerned, right? Like I think content is really challenging with AI. I think that there still need to be editors, and I still think the human mind is much better than AI, but I think that I think if you look at, I watched this movie from the 80s the other night and I was like, oh my God, it was so P&L, like the numbers mean so much. I I'm optimistic in that because I was in the dot-com bubble, and it was very scary at that time as well. I feel like we are there again. I think thinking about the jobs, I don't know what like your robotics conference, right? Like if robots are going to become part of our everyday life, which I think they will at some point, like what does that mean? Is robotics going to be where people get jobs versus getting jobs where they were before? Like I do think new industries will be created and continue to be created, and those people will get the opportunity to work there. And I do think some things will go away, which will be kind of sad. My biggest hope is that the human mind and the creativity and the way we think and what we do, machines will never hopefully be able to do that. And as long as those two things can coexist, I think we're going to be fine.
This has been so amazing. We could go on for hours, Debbie, but we should let you get back, and we should end on this hack, which is a tip or an idea that each of us go around and share with everybody. And I'll go first. I have been using the Robinhood, the trading app. I've been using their credit card.
I just got it.
Just got it too?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, 3%. It's like, I feel like we're sponsored by Robinhood. Robinhood, to be fair, is really like a casino. I think you kind of go in thinking you'll make money, and then you end up losing money in the end. So beware that so the reason the credit card is so good is that it pays 3% cash back, and the 3% cash back goes back into your Robinhood account where you can cash it out, or you can play more in the casino of stocks. And so that's what I mean by inevitably they probably get it back anyway. But if you're diligent and have self restraint, you will get 3% cash back. So that's my tip. What about you, Taylor?
So I've been playing around with the Tesla self-driving, the full self-driving, and it's,
But you bought a Tesla?
yeah, long story, but so it's so good. I can't believe that people don't talk about it every day. I've been driving a lot. I'm in Orange County, and I've been driving a lot to LA and to San Diego. Some of these drives, they're an hour, 20 minutes, hour, 15 minutes. But the self-driving just makes it where you just go doo doo, and then it just takes off. And it's amazing. I was having brunch with my mom a couple days ago, and we did the smart summon, and she freaked out. She couldn't believe that the car was like driving to me to pick me up. And it's a really great party trick, but it's really amazing technology. I'm blown away. And what I'm amazed by is how quickly I just like gave in to the machine. So how quickly I was like, oh, it's better than me. Okay, take away, do whatever you want, car. It did change lanes without, I don't think it noticed it did, but it switched from this lane to this lane on the highway. Thankfully, there's nobody next to me. It didn't turn signal or anything. I think it got confused and went over. So it does make some mistakes.
You have to watch it.
Yeah, you had to watch it. But you know what? Maybe I've done that sometimes too. I don't know. So it's really amazing technology. Like it just blows me away. It's really incredible. It's like driving in the future. What about you, Debbie?
So I have a Tesla too, and I will say it does change lanes. But one thing you have to watch, Taylor, is like if it can't get off an exit, it just will keep going, and then you're like, "Wait, what just happened?" Because it can't get in, it won't go in. It won't like we would, so you have to be careful. That happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and it took me another 25 minutes to get somewhere. I was like, "Oh," so just be careful as you do it. I do love the self driving. It took me a while to qualify, but yeah.
So around New York, all the tricky tunnels and exits off of New York, Long Island.
Yeah, like I was in the city. It was supposed to go one way, went a different way. I was like, now it's like totally in the wrong place. It's fine. So I would say that I have been using ChatGPT 5 to actually design my rooms in my home. And so I've really had a lot of fun taking a photo of where I am, giving it direction, prompting it. And now I actually just sent a picture to one of my contractors and was like, here, this is what I want to build. And it's perfectly what I wanted because I was able to finesse it to a way. So I am having so much fun kind of like going in and just playing with ChatGPT in a way that's very visual, but very much about learning how to prompt it and creating things that, of course, you'd still want to use an interior designer for certain things. But for me, I'm like, oh, I can do this. And it's been really fun. So it's not a hack, but it's a really fun thing how I'm using ChatGPT to actually kind of progress in my life of the things I'm working on.
That's a great hack. It's perfect. Debbie, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you both. Really fun.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down.